past few years, I've been reducing my alcohol intake, and in the past year, I stopped drinking completely. Going sober has probably been the most powerful development strategy I've ever done. My life has improved massively. Our school has grown significantly. I've been able to help my artists in much bigger ways. I've even started traveling the world. I've been able to access myself in ways that I never imagined. And I'm not here trying to convert you into sobriety. I just want to share with you the biggest lessons that I learned and that I wasn't expecting from stopping drinking. The first thing I realized is how much more energized I was. Energy is probably this thing that we're all craving. Now, this is why we're all addicted to caffeine and coffee and energy drinks. But alcohol is a depressant. You're rotting in your bed a day after a long night out. There is no Monster energy drink that's going to help you. And now you're not going to be productive and you'll get nothing done that day. Productivity itself was an unforeseen benefit of doing this. Because of my energy levels, my productivity went through the roof. That energized state, that naturally energized state, not from caffeine, not from a Red Bull, it made me want to do more. A lot of my students that have tried the sobriety, they mention this as well, and it goes into the music. They want to spend more time finishing that track. Now they have the energy to wake up early and get their networking or content done. The next thing that I realized is all about the industry stigma. Yes, we all work in music. And music is probably the only industry that I can think of where alcohol is tied to it. It's like this accepted thing that's almost part of the job, right? Artists are quite literally allowed to put on a rider that they need a bottle of Grey Goose. They need a bottle of tequila to do that job. So I initially thought that being sober in the context of music would make me seem like an outcast. Like you see your favorite artist on Instagram and it just seems like nonstop partying. But the opposite ended up being true. First of all, a lot of your favorite artists are not the degenerates that you think they are. Be realistic with yourself for a second. These people that are doing 200, 300 shows a year and they have to go to the airport and be on a plane and check into the hotel, you wouldn't be able to survive if you were drinking and hungover the whole time. I teach this class at Harvard and we just had James Hype this last semester, and he was even telling the students there, with the amount of shows that someone like him is playing, it's a bit like being an athlete. You need to keep yourself in physical and mental good shape. So when I go to shows sober or nights out sober, I actually notice a lot of folks are doing it too. And those that weren't, they didn't judge me. They didn't look at me like something was wrong with me. In almost an interesting way, they looked at me like, oh wow, Justin takes this pretty serious, he's a professional, and that's kind of cool. Now, I also understand that a lot of us use alcohol because it lowers our anxiety, especially in those situations. And I must admit, that's probably why I was using alcohol in the first place. It helps in those nights out, or maybe when you're on a date or you're nervous about a social event. The problem that I found with alcohol is that it's not very long lasting. And when it comes to all substances, whatever goes up must come down. So while the effects of drinking would help for a couple of hours, it eases that anxiety, but then things would go in the opposite direction. So while the effects of drinking would make me feel good and lower my anxiety, after a couple of hours, it would wear off and things would go in the opposite direction. Have you ever woken up from a night of drinking and you have that anxiety, that hangover anxiety? You know exactly what I'm talking about. So in the long run, alcohol was actually making me more anxious. But yes, the first few times I went out sober, I definitely felt some nerves. And that's okay. That's human. We shouldn't always be trying to suppress every human emotion. And then after a few times of doing it, I actually felt more confident because you start seeing everything the night so clearly. And you can tell those are people that are kind of fucked up and you're not. You're just able to operate on such a higher frequency level. I think in our minds, we assume that we're more charismatic when we're drunk, but it's just not true. If you're sober and you see people that are pretty drunk, you're like, wow, this person isn't even making that much sense, but they think they are. So that brings me to the next thing that going sober really gave me, and that was this unexpected confidence. Being able to do these things sober made me feel better about myself. In a lot of ways, yes, the alcohol made me forget the anxieties I had, but then over the next day or two, it actually made things worse. I spoke to a buddy who's been sober for a very long time, and he's like, there's this saying, using alcohol for anxiety is like hitting yourself in the head with a hammer to cure a headache. Like, sure, you'll probably forget that you have a headache, but when you wake up, it's gonna be 10 times worse. And as time went on, the days turned into weeks and the weeks turned into months, and my body went back to this like baseline I haven't felt since I was much younger. The highs and lows weren't as extreme, the lows were not as long, and it's much nicer to be in this middle ground where you have more control. Speaking of that, brings me to the next point. Alcohol was probably the culprit or in some way behind a lot of the bad decisions that I've made. The control you have of your decision making when you're drunk is absolutely terrible. You say things you don't mean, you do things you wouldn't normally do, even in your music. I have a lot of students that do this where they will make a song really drunk and then they'll listen to it the next day and be like, oh my God, this is just awful. You know, the same with DJing. DJs, look, I've booked so many DJs, thousands of DJs, and they think that they're doing better when they're drunk, but a lot of times they're fucking up. But the alcohol just allows them to not realize it. The next thing that was a total game changer for my entire life was sleep. I've always been bad with sleeping. It's always been tough for me to stay asleep and go to sleep. When I was a little bit younger, I actually thought that like alcohol helps you sleep, like it makes you pass out. But you learn over time that when you're sleeping from alcohol, you're not actually getting the deep REM sleep that refreshes you. Like even if you were to black out and pass out for 10 hours and you're out cold, you wake up and you still feel exhausted. But once I stopped for good, the alcohol, the toxins, little by little got out of my body, and my sleep just got better and better and better. And that goes back in the productivity and the energy you get, it just keeps getting more and more. I started going to the gym more. I started meditating again. I started paying closer attention to what I'm eating. There's no more McDonald's at 3 a.m. when you're drunk at a night out. Another thing I found is just mental sharpness. I've been joking with Zach for years about this, how our memories are getting bad and we're not as sharp anymore. You know, we're getting old. But once I stopped with the booze, things started to come back. Look, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a scientist, but just with my own experience, I'd go out for a night, I don't know what it does to my brain, and then the next day, 2, 3, my brain would just feel more cloudy and foggy. And as I got older, it wasn't just a hangover. It went on for many, many days. And today, now, it doesn't exist at all. And I know it's kind of weird that we're talking about this on a music production YouTube channel, but in our program, in our actual premium program, we believe in stuff beyond just the music production, because there's a lot that affects your music. Your habits, your professionalism, your energy, your efficiency, all of that goes into your music. And by the way, if you're interested in a lot of this development stuff, our premium program, it also goes into your branding, your marketing, the networking, the community building, and of course, the music production. The results we've had speak for themselves. In the last 12 months, we've had 537 records signed. We've had 11 students play EDC, and we're always looking for good applications. However, it is a serious application process, but if you're interested, I'll leave a link below in the comments. The next thing I've noticed, my students have noticed this as well, is the respect and the professionalism that they've seen. In an industry like ours, yes, there's a lot of people going out and getting fucked up, but it's still a business and people take it seriously, and no one wants the dude drunk and fucked up at their club. I've personally seen DJs getting thrown out of their own shows. I've seen people get blacklisted. People don't want to book them anymore. On the flip side, when my students show up to a gig or to a networking thing or something at night and they're not drunk, they're looked at as being respectful. This person respects what we're trying to do here. Yeah, this is fun, but this is also our livelihood. You know, we're trying to feed our families here. I don't want this to be seen as like some talk that your parents are trying to give you. You know, don't drink, it'll ruin your life. Of course, I don't believe that. I was very successful in music, even though I was drinking for a while. I've just seen sobriety as this very interesting tool to try something new. It's given me so many new perspectives and abilities. Maybe try it for a month, see how it goes, or maybe limit the heavier drinking sessions to when you're not going out and being in a more professional environment. By the way, let me know in the comments, have you tried a sobriety month? Have you tried stopping and cutting it down a little bit? I'd love to hear your thoughts and how it went for you. But if you want to watch more videos on the tactical stuff of music production, music branding, I'll have the algorithm pop up a video now that's tailored directly to you. We're going to see you in that one. Goodbye for now.